Hey, introduce yourself.
Okay, my name is Chuck Smith. I'm running for Attorney General of Virginia, and I'm from Virginia Beach. Originally, I'm from Greensboro, North Carolina, born July 4th, 1952, a little bit of ways away. I entered the Marine Corps in 1970. I like to brag about that because while people were running away from Vietnam and the war, I mean, I didn't go to Vietnam, but I was a Marine, I was an 0311, you know anything about the Marine Corps, that's the infantry, those are the people who fight. While people are running away, I'm running to the recruiter. So I like to brag about that. I had a good time in the Marine Corps. I got out of the Marine Corps, I was elected president of my class. I was the oldest one in the class because instead of going from high school, I went to the Corps. And after college, after two years of college, I entered my last year of college and I got accepted into the Navy JAG Corps program. And so I was a Navy JAG for those 3 years, and of course everything else is history. I retired from the Navy JAG Corps in 2008. And I came to Virginia Beach, made a home here, went to Roanoke a little bit, came back to Virginia Beach, just had a great time. What I want to do, I understand you've got a lot of questions for me and I want to make sure that I address those questions, but I really would like to take some time to tell you that our country is in crisis mode. Lots going on in this country, and whenever you're in crisis mode, you need crisis people. You need tough people. You need people who are going to be able to rectify things. And so, first and foremost, I want to say that if you're not John Moss, and if you're not Bob Marshall, and if you're not Dave Bratt, you should not be running for re-election. All right? And you say, why? Why is that? Listen, we have in this country a $19 trillion deficit growing at a rate of more than $2 million a minute, $3.8 billion a day. We need crisis people. We need tough people. We need to get back to the Constitution. Those two people will help do it. I got another statement to make. If you're not John Moss and you're not Bob Marshall and certainly you're not Dave Bratt and you don't have courage, you shouldn't be running for election. And why is that? Good, applause, fine. Why is that? Because we are still at war with our neighbors. Yep. And a lot of our citizens are indifferent toward principles of freedom of faith. We're still aborting babies. Muslims are killing Americans. Illegal immigrants are killing Americans. Americans are killing Americans. And worst of all, Americans are targeting our law enforcement. How crazy is that? We need crisis people. We need to get this country back. But not just that. We can't even hide behind the borders of national security, where the very fact of illegal immigration, the very act of border insecurity, refugee resettlement, unidentified Muslim terrorists running around our country, those things strike at the heart of a sovereign nation. And let me just tell you that I'm not Donald Trump. I know you can clearly see that, but I want to say that we do not oppose all Muslims. We do not oppose all immigrants. We want people to do what they would do in their own country, and that is come to this country and respect this country and respect the people and abide by the laws of this country. As Attorney General, that is the first thing that I will insist upon. But as we look at where we are and what it is we're doing, what I like to think is wrong with this world is not that God created it. What's wrong with this world is that we have people in this world. And some of these people don't believe in anything higher than themselves.
That's right.
We need to change that. Similarly, what's wrong with the Constitution is not that we have pledged to it, but some of the very people who've pledged to it don't follow it. Exactly. I like to think that every problem in America can be laid squarely at the feet of our elected officials and the people they appoint. I'll explain that. Every problem in America, nearly every problem, can be laid squarely at the feet of our elected officials and those that they appoint, because they're not following the Constitution. I know you say, well, a lot of people violate laws, and a lot of people don't do the things that are correctly, but we're not asking for people to follow the law as an ends to means. We're asking for our elected officials to follow the Constitution as a means to an end. That is, our country will be better. Now, think about it. The greatest threat to civilization, the greatest weapon to our anti-gun lobbyists, the greatest weapon of all times is not the gun, it's not the revolver, it's not, the greatest threat is not illegal immigration, the greatest threat is not federal national security, the greatest threat is not ISIS. The greatest threat to civilization is an elected official who does not keep his word.
Amen.
Everything else pales in comparison to that. Everything. Think about it. We take all of our worldly goods. Can y'all hear me?
Yeah.
Better? Great.
No.
No.
Better.
All right, okay. We take all of our worldly goods, all of them, our property, our homes, our houses, and we give them to government and say, government, all we ask for you is just one thing. You may think we own our house, you know, it's a title, but we accept that title. You may think we own our car, it's a title, but we accept it. You may think we have our children, that they're ours. Okay, great, they're in our home and they have our name. But we ask government one thing: follow the Constitution. And what do our elected officials do the moment they get in office? They want to tell us what we should be doing. They want to take our gun rights, right? They want to define for us how we should live outside of the Constitution. But isn't that like counterproductive? They come in this room, they run for office, they say all these great things, and then they get in office and they do something completely different. Now, I just want to give you a couple examples. As you know, I'm an attorney, and you have to be an attorney to run for AG, incidentally. A no-brainer there. I'm in the courtroom. The judge comes in the courtroom. The judge says, who is the judge incident? The judge is someone who has been appointed in Virginia. Other states are elected, but in Virginia they're appointed. Appointed by whom? Our elected officials who take an oath to abide by the Constitution, right? And the judge does too. Case comes in, judge calls the case, plaintiff, you ready to proceed? He says, yes. Defendant, you ready to proceed? I say, yes, Your Honor, ready to proceed. Judge says, okay, plaintiff, call your first witness. They put the first witness on the stand. The witness testifies about an hour. Chuck Smith comes and cross-examines the witness for about 14 minutes. On the 15th minute, the judge says, stop. I've heard enough. I've heard enough. Judgment for the plaintiff. This is a sitting judge. Judgment for the plaintiff. I said, Your Honor, hold on, please, Your Honor. The defendant has not testified yet. Article 1, Section 8 of the Virginia Constitution. The Fifth Amendment to the United States Constitution says, you may not like what the defendant's going to say, but she has a right, a constitutional right to get on the witness stand. Who appointed this judge? Well, we know who appointed our elected officials, but how did they get appointed? They get appointed on qualifications? Or they get appointed on knowing someone who knows someone who knows someone who knows someone who gave to perhaps a campaign? That's how we've always been doing it. I'm asking us to do something different. Let's choose someone based on qualifications. If it's courage we're looking for, let's choose courage. We need somebody to defend the Constitution of the Commonwealth of Virginia. Choose a Marine. That would be me. I took an oath. I enlisted in the Marine Corps and everyone's running away from it. There's an 0311. Again, if you don't think, I've got a, who would have been my boss back then, Kenny Golden, he can tell you about the 03s because they were aboard his ship, and also some of the Airedales. Everyone else running away. Chuck Smith goes and enlisted in the infantry of all things. I think that counts for something. That takes courage. We need someone to defend the Constitution of the United States with courage, with dedication and loyalty. Choose a Navy JAG, that would be me. I retired as a Navy JAG Commander after 26 years of combined military service. Active, inactive, and reserve. Where in God's name can we find somebody to stand up for our law enforcement? And stand down bad actors. Where in God's name can we find someone to stand up for our children, our communities, their safety, our schools? Where in God's name can we find someone who's practiced law long enough to know what law is, someone who's practiced law for more than 36 years? Here I am, O Lord, standing in the shadows of grace. That would be me. I practiced law for more than 36 years, representing Virginians from all walks of life. I know a lot of you believe that you know me, but did you know that I grew up in the projects of Greensboro? Did you know that when I was growing up, we did not have lotion in our house? Now, I'm not complaining. I'm telling you, what did we use for lotion? Anybody? Butter. My grandmother put butter on Chucky's face and his skins and marched him off to church on Sunday. And what could we not do back then if we didn't go to church? back, I guess it would be 1960s. Nothing. Why? Because they had what's called the blue law.
That's right. Everything was closed.
Everything was closed. So little churches marching to church, singing, Jesus loves me. I stayed in the church. I was groomed in the church. Now, I'm not perfect. I don't make all perfect decisions. I know that's what you're going to talk about a little bit tonight. I make mistakes sometimes. But I try, first of all, to keep my faith in God, and I try to keep the Constitution strong. I'm running for Attorney General. Listen, I was up in Northern Virginia, and I won't call names, but I was up in Fairfax, and after I got through speaking, a gentleman came up to me, put his arms around me, and said, Chuck, and again, I'm not going to call names, he said, so-and-so is like family up here. He's our friend. There's a place for you in this party. And I looked at him and said, you're darn tootin' there's a place for me. I'm going to win Attorney General of Virginia. And why? Because there is no competition. My opponents, let me throw this out there. When I went to the Marine Corps in 1970, my opponents were not even born. Think about that. And I've practiced law ever since I started practicing law. Strike that. One of them, I believe, was 3 years old. If it's qualifications you want, it's me. If it's a good old boy, look somewhere else. We need to get beyond that. We need to begin picking people who are going to represent us and stop doing what we've done always. It has not worked. Nearly every time people get in office, they look around and they say, oh gosh, what am I going to do? It's our elected officials, the ones that we elect, the ones that you put in office, who tell us that they're going to either take our gun rights or they're going to vote to change the Constitution or just going to completely disobey it. For once, I would like for someone running off to stand up here, and, as I'm standing here, and tell you that we don't need more laws. We need to enforce the laws we've got.
Amen.
My first day in office, I would like to see an Attorney General give not just I'd like to hear our elected officials give not just a State of the Union, but I'd like to see an Attorney General give a State of the Constitution speech to show where our Constitution lines up with the laws that our General Assembly is making. We make a law to repair a law, to repair a law, to repair a law. We don't need that. We don't need more grown men and boys trying to use what is clearly marked the girls' bathroom. We do not need more people running around in our streets unchecked, providing insecurity to this nation. Who do we call? Who do we call when we need someone to defend the Constitution? Who should we call? Well, we can't call the president because he's so busy learning. I guess he learned this in Harvard, that the process of a bill becoming a law begins and ends with the President of the United States. We can't call the governor, who is so tuned that I guess he wants to give Hillary 200,000 more votes, that he be damned the security of Virginia. And certainly we can't call Supreme Court justices, who, by the way, if any judge of a United States District Court had pulled what Ruth Bader Ginsburg pulled, they would have had that judge's seat.
That's right.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
We need somebody to defend the Constitution, and that can only be the Attorney General. The Attorney General's got to be the person that stands up for our Constitution. And so I'm not asking you to vote for me because I look good, because I talk good, because I walk good. I'm asking you to vote for me because I have what we need in office, and that word is called qualifications. You find somebody with more than 36 years of law experience, vote for them. Somebody who was in the Marine Corps, Navy, JAG Corps, more years than I have, you vote for them. I'm the only one that's retired. By the way, I'm the only former chairman of a Republican Party unit. Mind you, Virginia Beach, the largest Republican Party in the Commonwealth of Virginia. I'm the only former chairman of the statewide Ethnic Coalitions Committee, which was called the Welcoming Committee. I'm the only, in fact, I've been chairman, president, officer on the board of nearly every organization I've ever belonged. And that's not just me saying Gary Byler. That's not just me saying it, Gary Byler. That's my peers saying it. And lastly, I want to say this before I sit down. When I applied for a judge, and this is a sticking point, when I applied for judge in our beloved Virginia Beach, it was our elected officials who looked at my resume and didn't think I was qualified. Didn't even give me an interview. Not even an interview. I'm going to throw this out, and I stand behind this statement. You find somebody in Virginia with and you have it in front of that little thing, looks like a Hershey bar. That's my background. You find somebody with that resume or better in the Commonwealth of Virginia. Find somebody in the United States of America who has done the things that I've done in my 64 years of living. And I'll stand with you and vote for that person. I'm telling you, you're not going to find it. If it's qualifications you're looking for, I'm your guy. Thank you so much. Did I toot my horn? Now the tough questions. Yes.
You mentioned it earlier, so I'm going to repeat what you were saying, and I'm going to ask you a question about it. The Clintonista in the governor's mansion, otherwise known as Terry McCullough, said he was going to input a bill to re-enfranchise 200,000 felons in an effort to get his former boss, Hillary Clinton, elected. The court struck that down, and he has vowed to do that on an individual basis, as is his power to do so as governor. If you're elected Attorney General, is there anything you're going to be able to rescind those re-enfranchisement of those felons?
First thing I'm going to do is when I'm elected Attorney General, after I make sure that we have a State of the Constitution speech to the General Assembly, first thing I'm going to do is make sure that each of our constitutional officers, certainly each of our elected officials, are following the Constitution. And what I didn't add is that I'm going to make sure that the governor, whomever that may be, understands and is following the Constitution. You know, the Attorney General, you all may not know this, but the Attorney General does not represent individuals. He represents the agencies, the boards, the universities, and commissions. But it's those boards, agencies, universities, and commissions that regulate every facet of our life. Yeah. And the advice that they're giving, who's giving them advice? So yes, I will make sure that, number one, our Constitution is defended, and I'll make sure the security of Virginians is paramount. May I say this too? I was at a hearing before the VMRC. I've been practicing a long time, so I do a lot of stuff. VMRC, Virginia Marine Resources Commission. Those are the ones that regulate the people who do some tough work in Virginia, or watermen. I don't know, how many of you know about watermen? Okay, they're out on our waterways, and they're the ones who produce your clams and your crabs and all that. I mean, they go fish, they go deep seating. Well, they had a hearing to go before the commission to take someone's license to be a waterman. Some of these people have been doing this all of their life. So they were going to take his license. The Attorney General's assistant was there. You know, the Attorney General represents all the agencies. This is an agency, so he sends an assistant. Attorney General's assistant was there, and before the hearing started, the Attorney General's assistant, I was unaware of this, gave the members of the commission my client's complete background. Where have you known that to take place? In any hearing, in any court process, the evidence is presented so that everyone will see it that is presented. I found out about that because one of the commissioners said, Mr. Smith, your client has all these convictions on his record. I said, sir, how do you know about those convictions? He said, well, the AG's office gave those to us so we would be prepared for the case. Who appointed this Assistant Attorney General? Our Attorney General did. Who's following the Constitution? No one. So yes, my first commitment is to make sure that the Constitution of Virginia is followed. The Constitution of the United States is followed. And by the way, Mark Herring, you don't get to disagree with the Constitution just because you don't think it belongs there. Your job as an Attorney General, my job as Attorney General, is to defend the Constitution. If I don't like it, then I go to the legislature. If I don't like it, I may tell the judge, well, personally, I don't particularly like this, but I'm going to defend the rights of people who want their Constitution defended. Sir, in the back.
Sir, I heard you mention that the immigration issue. I'm curious how the Attorney General handles an immigration issue when it's more a federal issue.
No one is going to come in the state of Virginia on my watch who is going to affect the security of Virginians. And we see this happening not just in some of our lower states, but we see this happening in some of our states throughout the country. The security issue should be paramount. And I think the Attorney General's job is to make that argument. I think the Attorney General's job is to stand up. The Supreme Court made a decision, not just on the marriage amendment, but they made a decision on some of these gay rights issues. And every Attorney General in the country, almost everyone, has fallen down, fallen prey, and given up. No one is standing up saying no. Yes, I understand what you're saying, Mrs. Supreme Court of the United States, but this is our position. We're taking this to court. You see some states doing that. You see some Attorney General standing. I believe the governor of Alabama, the Supreme Court Justice of Alabama, was standing up. We need to see more people doing that. Remember those bakers who did not want to bake? Why are attorneys generals caving on those issues? Why isn't someone defending? So what? The Supreme Court has made a decision. We deserve an attorney general who's going to fight for us. At the end of the day, I ask people, if the attorney general of your state is not going to defend a right that's in the Constitution, who is your Attorney General? Who is the Attorney General then? You don't have one. If he or she thinks, because I don't like it, I'm going to do away with it, who is the Attorney General? And we see that happening. It's like a cancer, it's like a disease that's coming down from the presidency of the United States. And if you don't like something, you just don't enforce it. Just do something else. Yes, ma'am.
Chuck, I understand, and I'm not really well versed in any of the rules and what the jurisdiction of the Supreme Court is. But I read that even though the Supreme Court, their word is final, that really their word is just is not really the law. It's a recommendation or it's an opinion. And so I want to understand why someone would say that. I always thought that if the Supreme Court passes judgment on something, that then it's a law and you can't change it, you can't go against it. But if it's an opinion, you know, how can we protect ourselves against opinions that take away our liberties?
So Governor Huckabee, you know Governor Huckabee, raised this issue. And at first I didn't really understand what he's saying, but I think he's spot on. I think he's saying the same thing you're saying. Supreme Court of the United States makes a decision, right, their decision, and all of a sudden it becomes a law. Well, if that's the case, whatever happened to Dred Scott? How many of you know about the Dred Scott case, right? The blacks were, not citizens of the United States. The Supreme Court made a decision. So why am I standing up in front of you? There's been no law passed on that. What?
Actually, there is.
Black code.
The 14th Amendment to the Constitution granted citizenship to all black Americans.
The ratification of the Supreme Court's decision, in fact, the 14th Amendment didn't do that at that moment. The ratification of the Dred Scott decision did not take place as a ratification of that decision. And so what Governor Huckabee was saying is that if the Supreme Court makes a decision, that decision has got to go to the legislature, and the legislature then has got to combine that in a law, pass a bill that makes that a law. Since that was never done, then Dred Scott, the blacks are still not citizens. In this particular case, the Supreme Court makes a decision, not just on the marriage amendment, but they made a lot of things. Those things are not law. That's what Governor Huckabee was saying. Now, we've not had that tested. Listen, when the Supreme Court said that marriage included everybody, all right, there's been no ratification of that. But if one of the lower judges had gone against the Supreme Court, what would happen to that judge? When the Supreme Court justice, a state judge of Alabama, decided that he was not going to allow those marriage licenses to go through, then what pressure was brought to bear on him? Where is the law on that? What I hear her saying, what I hear Governor Huckabee saying is that there's hope. It is not the final decision. There are things that we can do. We can impress upon our legislative members. Listen, whatever happened to all those members of Congress who said all we needed was both houses of Congress and we would defund Obamacare?
Right.
All we need is both of them come. We could stop the TPP. We could stop the Iran nuclear deal.
Oh, you're talking about the Republicans running against Trump now, right?
Well, they don't have the courage that you were talking about.
Courage. What did the lion say in The Wizard of Oz? What I got, they ain't got. Courage. Yes.
Hey, how everybody's doing? My name is Montreal Lambert, and I'm a part of MAID. Since we're speaking on the Constitution, the 13th Amendment banned slavery and involuntary servitude except the cause of punishment for a crime. Does that go hand in hand with people being incarcerated, felons such as myself, once they are free and join society? What type of act can the judicial system play to reassure the rights of those of felons that are coming out of these prisons to get their rights back?
No law has been passed to stop people from committing a crime, and no law could be passed to stop that. When you have and of course no law can be stopped to stop people who commit crimes from going to prison. So the 13th Amendment was never designed to stop people from going to prison. It was designed to stop people who were being forced into slavery, as you were, but forced to do forced labor without any input from the law. In other words, they had committed no crime, they'd done nothing, and yet they're being farmed out and hired as slaves. The idea, though, that you can use the 13th Amendment to make people who come out of prison be released upon our society, I think is a false premise. What we need to do is to make sure that those who have served their time and who have given back to society according to the court order are released, but they need to be released individually. What you may be talking about, Governor of Virginia. You cannot have a governor making a decision, because he's seen it in his own case. He's made mistakes. He's released people who shouldn't have been released. But you cannot have a governor making a decision that en masse is going to release people onto our society unless there's an individual check in each individual case. Now, I don't want to make this a conversation between you and I, so I'll come back to you. Let me get somebody whose hand is raised first, and I promise you I'll come back. Yes, sir.
I want to ask you the same question I asked Mr. Adams and I asked Mr. Bell, just because I'm comparing your answers. And this question is, what is the role?
I guarantee you I'll get it right.
I don't know what's right. I just want to hear what your opinion is, because I'm not a lawyer. What is the role of the Attorney General in holding the General Assembly accountable when they pass unconstitutional by the state of Virginia or the federal government law? And as a citizen, one of your predecessors was Bob McDonald, and the General Assembly passed an unconstitutional law, and I went to him as Attorney General, and he told me what you just said. I represent these boards and commissions, I don't represent you. And I said, well, how do I get you to challenge the constitutionality of this unconstitutional law? And he said, not my job. And so we had to sue him in court, and we won, and the Supreme Court of Virginia ruled it to be unconstitutional. What's the role of the Attorney General in validating that the laws that are passed by the General Assembly of Virginia are in fact constitutional, and what can you do to prevent non-constitutional law from being passed by the General Assembly?
The role of the Attorney General is to enforce and defend the Constitution of the United States, period. If the General Assembly passes a law which is in contradiction, that Attorney General should be participating in that process of how that bill becomes a law. And even if it becomes a law, he should be writing his opinion. Listen, I entered this race as Attorney General, not because I wanted to have some type of plenary authority, but because I knew that the most powerful weapon the Attorney General has is in his opinion writing. That is the most powerful weapon he has, and you all have seen it locally in some of the letters that have been written by the assistant attorney generals. And in those letters, they're stating, well, you know, this is not from the Attorney General, this is from us. But the most effective weapon that he has is in the opinion writing. Listen, who is going to stand up for the Constitution if it is not the Attorney General? Who's going to say that what you guys have done in Congress, and you're not all lawyers, who's going to say that what you've done does not meet the muster test of the Constitution? It must be the Attorney General. Yes, you do not represent individuals in that sense, but representing the Constitution, as I told you earlier, is representation of the individuals, because they're looking to the Constitution as their protection against their property rights. Taking private property for private purposes should be illegal. Who should be standing up for that? The AG's office should be saying, this should not be, you know, when it rises to that level, this should not be done.
Well,
I promise this young man I'd get back
that
to
would
him.
be the last
Okay.
question,
All
okay?
right. Okay.
Thank you.
Actually, there was another one back there. So it might be unfair to go to him. Let me answer.
Are you gonna stay? You can answer.
I'll stay and answer your question on the side. Yes, sir, but this gentleman had a question in the back.
You really want me to answer? Okay.
Well, that's why I'm here.
The governor has a right to if a person is convicted of a felony crime and he loses his rights to certain rights as a citizen, after he completes his whatever sentence that he gets, that person has the right to go before the governor and ask that his rights be reinstated, and the governor has the right to do it. What the governor of McAuliffe did was he turned around and he blanket fed the rights to people still in prison. So now it was struck down and he had to redo it, and he's doing it one by one. My question is, these rights, other states automatically grant these rights after a certain period of time. You, as an Attorney General, have the responsibility to make sure that the rights are fulfilled. My question has to do with illegal immigration. If a person is in this country illegally, why can't the state of Virginia deport them, send them right back out of the country?
This is the problem I had, picking up on the last question first. This burns me up. Illegal immigrants in this country didn't come here all 12 million or 13 million at one time. First there was 1, then there was 2, 3, 4, 5, 100. Where were our elected officials? Why were they just seeing that and not doing anything about it? But in answer to that question, specifically with regard to the felons, it's the governor's responsibility to review each case on an individual basis. Some people he may not release because he feels that the threat is too great. What's the Charles Manson lady who's had it reviewed so many years? That governor felt the threat was too great. You must protect the security of Virginians. He's shaking his head. I'll talk with you individually. You must protect the security of Virginians, and the Attorney General is the only one who can do that in full face of the Constitution, and that's what I'll do if I'm your Attorney General. Thank you so much. I wish you had more time. I'd stay here all day.